Good, and we're back. And we are back. We're nailing this today. Really, we are. And with our first conversation this morning, we have in studio with us talking about the anti-trafficking upgrade, particularly about abuse of technology. In studio, we have Juanna Murillo, who is the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Council focal point. And we have Sean Vargas, who is the Director of Department of Human Services. Good morning.
Good morning.
I did correct, right?
Yes, you did.
But thank you so much for stopping by. Of course, this is a very important topic, and we want to make sure that our audience understands the severity of the situation. So just for our own, foundation, talk to us about what is the definition of human trafficking.
So human trafficking, the definition can get pretty technical, right? If we talk about what has to be proven in court and so forth. Right. But in essence, it's where force, fraud, or coercion is used for the purpose of obtaining commercial sex or forced labor. And forced labor and commercial sex is just two of the purposes that we consider that human trafficking occurs. There are other ways that persons are exploited. It's kind of a wide-ranging idea, enforcement of criminal activity, prostitution, illegal organ removal, legal adoption. It's wide-ranging, but in Belize particularly, we see forced labor and commercial sex. So we focus on those particular two areas, but in essence, that's what human trafficking is.
And what is Belize doing to fight that type of exploitation of humans?
Well, I think to set the stage, we want to look at the organization that's in place to address human trafficking in Belize, and that's the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Council, which is a multi-sectoral agency, well, not agency, but council that takes from government ministries and NGOs. And what the idea is behind that is that if it's their role in government, it's their role in addressing human trafficking. So for the DPP, their role is prosecutions of criminal cases brought by the police, and therefore they prosecute all trafficking cases on behalf of the police and the government. So that's how it works. If that is their role, then that is their role in addressing human trafficking in Belize.
So I know Mr. Vargas, as the Director of the Department of Human Services, you would be able to put into context some of those services offered to victims in this process.
Yeah, our role as part of the council looks at victim care. We deal with survivors or possible victims of trafficking. The government has invested heavily in care for trafficking victims or survivors, and that is something that has been, how long we've been looking at?
For a minute.
So the report cited what the ministry has done in terms of looking at the migrant shelters, the investment that the department put into staff, employing more staff, and looking at access to transportation and technologies for social workers who are in the field.
Why is it of such importance for the government and through the department to make these investments in this area?
Because we have to look at the victims and what they are going through. We have to look at what is important for us as a country and what we're going to tolerate. So it has to show that the government is serious, and while the police and the DPP is going to focus on the prosecution, our responsibility is to ensure that the victims are comfortable and we prepare them for what is coming next. So we will go the extra mile to support the victims.
Are these victims mainly migrants? Because I heard you mention migrant.
Yes, the Belizeans are a part of it, but migrants are also a large component.
From Central America?
Central America, yes. And within the region.
Okay. How do you deal with a situation where some victims might not even know that that is the situation that they're in?
When we look at when we look at that, we make sure that we inform the client or the survivor the best way we can, and we don't move directly or have the police officers direct contact with the victim or the investigators. They are attached to a social worker first, And then through that preparation process, then an interview session is taken. And once that is done and the details of the matter are pulled from there.
Okay, I want to take a step back where we're talking about the types of services that you do provide, but how do you even get to that point where you are being told that there might be a possibility of human trafficking in this area?
Well, that's where we come into the conversation of reporting, and we get reports from various entities within our community. We get it directly from police, we get reports through Crime Stoppers, we do get reports through different like offices within the country, so like DHS
NGOs.
offices or NGOs. People might come to them for service from something completely different, and then it might be identified. And so it comes to, the focus is really on identification and reporting. And the good thing is we do have NGOs working across the country looking at human trafficking and what it looks like. And so they oftentimes call us and say, you know, we have a potential case that we would like to refer to you guys. So it depends. It depends on the case and where it's coming from, on whether or not we're going to get it from Crime Stoppers or we're going to get it from an NGO, or if they're going to walk into DHS's office,
make the report,
or walk into the police department and police office and make a report. The good thing is what we have done, and this is probably not included in the report because this was finished after the reporting period, but through working with an NGO, we actually validated protocols for identifying victims where the Department of Human Services, social workers, labor officers, and immigration officers were trained on how to identify victims on their job. And currently they're doing a training of trainers to ensure that any new persons that come on staff will also get training on identifying, because persons might come to, especially since we talked about migrants being a part of the victims, a proportion of victims, we know that immigration officers might come in contact with them, and we want to make sure that when they're interviewing them or going through their process, that they're looking out for potential victims.
What areas in Belize does the report say this issue is more prevalent?
It doesn't speak specifically to an area, but based on observation, we've seen a lot of the cases coming from the district areas, San Ignacio or Cayo and the Stan Creek district, in terms of victims.
Closer to the border.
But also in the reporting component, we just have informed residents, informed Belizeans who would see certain things and would make note, and that's important for us also, because it shows that people are paying attention.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that, I guess I'm going to segue into something brief. Sure. Bring us to what's happening this Friday. Well, not this Friday, but this Saturday, but we're doing the event on Friday for World Day Against Human Trafficking, which is the United Nations Day identified as when we raise awareness for trafficking in persons, because we realize at the government level that we might know all of this information, but if the public does not know this information, it's useless.
Yes.
We need persons to be our eyes and ears, and we raise these campaigns because we realize that if they understand that there's a system in place to actually address what they're seeing, then they're more inclined to report. So we definitely see the importance of getting the public understanding of what is human trafficking, and that it does exist, because we do have persons that don't really think that it exists in Belize.
I don't know that there are persons, so yes, there are persons that don't think it exists, but there may also be those persons that see it as a mutually beneficial agreement in terms of labor. I give you cheap labor and you give me income.
But then that's where the exploitation comes in. We need to.
And then you
asked the question about not knowing if you are being
become the police.
Because that happens sometimes.
You become the police because you're running me down, trying to find me, but all I'm trying to do is make some money.
But that can happen to Belizeans that are trying to make their way to the United States.
Perhaps I'm talking more about in the United States
No, but
as well.
I think they underlying issue is that Belizean citizens don't think that it's happening to Belizeans. We often associate human trafficking with
other
people outside
outside
coming in.
coming in.
And I know that we don't even think about that kind of situation, especially when it's trafficking of children, right?
Right.
And they'll be used as forced labor at a young age and other things. But I wanted to talk about what the campaign is focusing on and what it is that you're trying to bring home for the general population.
Okay, so my biggest thing right now is that I want the Belizean public to develop empathy towards victims. And this is not me saying that they lack it, but maybe understanding what victims go through, they're more inclined to be compassionate towards the situation and be more willing to raise awareness or report something if they see it. And so the biggest thing for us, this World Day Against Human Trafficking, is to raise awareness because we want to raise empathy, but also there's a focus on the use and abuse of technology.
Right.
As we see that technology is coming up and younger persons are using social media more, it's those it is in those areas that we find that traffickers might be more inclined to seek for victims, because they look out for those that are vulnerable, or they put out advertisements, or they put out these hooks that persons might,
The fake ads.
and persons might say, well, I'll look into that because I need a job. Imagine a 17-year-old out of high school, their parents don't have money to send them to junior college or college. So what do? They need to find work, and if they see something that might be maybe too good to be true, they're not quite prepared to understand that is not the case. And then with traffickers, they will abuse technology by being able to make more profit without having to do much work. So if they have content on children or adults, they can send that or publish it or gain profit from it without having to lift a finger or going anywhere. But it's important to also see that technology is something that's useful for us, right? We've seen a lot of improvements in understanding how we can crack cases by using social media. And I know, like, the police unit that is dedicated to investigating human trafficking cases have done trainings with UNODC and with other groups that teach them how to do Facebook investigations, because we've realized the change in landscape, the culture, exactly. We need to adjust because we're going to be left behind once we finally get the hook of investigating cases that are happening on the ground. We might lose those on
How are
technology.
you planning to track those online? I would imagine that's quite difficult.
It is. It is quite difficult, and I can't speak as an expert, particularly on what progress we're making in technology-wise. But I can tell you this much: that programs and gadgets that can be useful for us. It is something that we're looking into to see how we can improve the ATIP's police unit's ability to investigate cases online.
I guess this is kind of overstepping a little bit, and this is how you know I watch a lot of TV. Is there any connection with like Interpol and getting that wide international database? So that we can track?
That's part of the
cool.
process.
So Interpol is a thing.
That is part of the process. The department works closely with the unit, and we look at matters and make sure we consult with them once they're issues that we're working on, and especially because the social workers spend a lot of time with the victims.
Right.
And so that trust is important. The trust component is important. And so information is had, and that's how we would ask them to pay attention to these things. So definitely the unit utilizes that Interpol component.
All right.
Remaining on the international scope, we understand that in the recent 2022 TIP report that Belize was upgraded to Tier 2.
Yes.
What does that mean for the country, and how do we address that tier to kind of bring it down?
Okay,
No,
so
we
let
go
me.
up. go up,
So
we go up.
think of it like CXC grades.
Yeah.
Grade
So
one
grade
is the
one is
highest.
Grade one is
So
the
grade
highest.
one
Right,
is
that's what I'm
higher,
saying.
right?
So if you're at grade 2, you want to get to grade 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, so how do you go down?
Okay, in my mind, I'm thinking go up.
Yeah.
No, we go up to grade 1.
You go
Right.
We go up tier 1.
I think, yeah,
Understood.
so tier 1 is the goal. And
Yeah.
I want to first by saying that we are very happy that the work that Belize has been doing
It's
is being recognized.
recognized.
And it's not just the faces that you see here. There's a lot of work being done on the ground, social workers, prosecutors, officers,
Immigration officers,
immigration,
police
labor,
officers.
NGOs. We have a community of persons working to assist us, intergovernmental agencies that help with funding and projects, and they push as well, persons that have the same passion. But to give some context to the report, there's 3 tiers that you can be put on. Tier 3 is the lowest, and that's where they say that you're not making significant efforts towards getting to the minimum standards according to US legislation. Tier 2 has 2 levels, so you have tier 2 and then you have tier 2 watch list. Tier 2 watch list is where you are making
effort.
some effort,
Yeah.
but you're
But not
not showing
significantly.
enough
To get to tier
evidence
2.
to get to tier 2. Tier 2 is where you've not met the minimum standard, but you're making significant efforts and have provided evidence to show that you are making those efforts. And then, so that's where we are right now. We used to be at tier 2 watch list, but this year we are at tier 2.
Nice.
Right? So it is it's a celebration
Yes,
for
it
us.
is, yeah.
And tier 1 is where we would want to be.
You've never been a tier 1 country, have you?
No, I don't believe.
I don't think anybody in the region is.
Bahamas and Guyana. I'm not sure what they are this year, but I know previously they have been at tier
So
1.
are we learning from them as well?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
what
it's a
we
study.
do,
I
yes.
think the CEO Santos had looked at that in terms of a study, what's going on in Guyana, how we can mirror what they're doing in Guyana. But it's significant efforts of the team
I think I
here
would
in
imagine
Belize.
that there's certain differences as well, though, because we are one of those countries that are smack in the middle between the Caribbean and
Right,
Central
so-
America. So there's a lot of trafficking by migration, tourism, all of that stuff. That
So I think that brings up a good conversation. I want to start by saying one thing first. What the council also does, they engage with regional agencies. So we are a part of the regional coalition against human trafficking and human smuggling, which involves Central American countries, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic. We also sit in meetings with the OAS and with CARICOM impacts to discuss issues of trafficking in persons. And so we do have dialogue with persons from the region looking at what they've done and maybe how we can learn from it. Now, with that conversation about migration, it's good to make that clarification between migrant smuggling and human trafficking and human smuggling, because with smuggling there is an element of consent, right, where they pay someone to get them across a border, and that is a crime against the state because you're violating the state's border rights to say who comes in and who goes out. Now human trafficking, my apologies, is where there's no consent. Right, there is no need for the crossing of a border, and there is force involved. Force, fraud, coercion, and other forms of deception.
Is there a way that the smuggling turns into trafficking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very easily,
often,
because smuggled migrants are very vulnerable to be trafficked because they're walking through, or they're
at the risk. They're at risk, and
Nobody I know. Nobody I miss them.
the
Right,
coyotes are
Right.
and they're not within legal territory. They're outside of where legality is.
Yes.
So police is not police, but BDF is not patrolling, or they don't have access to these places because they're intentionally avoiding authorities. So once you're with someone that's intentionally avoiding authorities, you are at risk of becoming a victim. There sometimes migrants may run out of money as they're on their journey, so they get trafficked. Or there are many different ways that it can turn into trafficking.
So we're quickly running out of time, but I want to go back to the campaign.
Yes.
And what we're planning and what it's going to be about, where it's going to be held at, what time, how can I go?
How can you go? I'm sure Channel 5 is invited, but we do have a virtual campaign that we are going to be, I guess, we have to call it the Blue Heart event on Friday. We're going to be in San Ignacio. We're going to be streaming it live for the public to see, and we've invited the media to be there. It's just to raise awareness about these exact same things that we're talking about, but a little bit more in detail. The idea is that everybody's going to be wearing blue, and I want to specify very heavily that the reason that we are asking you to wear blue is because it's the recognized universal color to raise awareness for human trafficking. This
Any
is
blue?
a United Nations, any blue.
Any blue.
It's not any blue, but any blue, because I can't expect everyone to have that same shade of
color.
blue, right? And it's
Just wear blue.
recognized. There we go. It's recognized by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. They have a particular campaign actually called the Blue Heart campaign.
Okay.
And the Blue Heart signifies two things. It signifies the sadness that victims have to experience because of what they've gone through, and the cold-heartedness of traffickers for utilizing victims, utilizing persons as property. So,
I love the fact that you made mention earlier that you're seeking to instill empathy for victims. Just from this discussion, where empathy begins for me is at the most critical level, which is that these situations could prove fatal for victims.
Yes.
Just imagine you have a child, and your child is somewhere where no one knows him or no one knows her, and that child is being put under severe stress. Victimized,
Sexual
exploitation, caused to work, and you're sitting here like, what I could only imagine what my child is going through, and that child living in that type of condition. And if the child ends up in a situation that proves to be fatal, no one knows what becomes of that person. Out of sight, out of mind, ends up on a missing list for years and then just disappears into thin air. And so when you think about it like that, when you put it in that type of context, for me, it's like, all right.
We're not going to see people chained up against lampposts on Albert
What you
Street.
see on the TV.
Right. It's not what you're seeing taken. It is it's a mental form of imprisonment, where persons really believe maybe that they have to be here, that they had no choice, or this is their fault. And they've been convinced of all these things, and so they don't want to come for help, or they don't know that this is what's happening to them because of the life that they've lived. You know, and it doesn't matter that you didn't have anything before. You're not because of somebody's history, you have the right to take away their dignity and their freedom.
The significant level of trauma that the survivors have to deal with. So for your life, it's a lifetime process, you know.
I can only imagine the conversations that happen between them and their social worker after theirs.
Social workers are angels.
Social
I kudos. We need more of those. But thank you both so much. I know we had so much more to talk about, and I know that I kind of trumped your list a little bit.
Hey, that's fine.
But you're welcome anytime, and we hope that you get a full house on.
I'll take that invitation seriously, you know.
Tomorrow then it comes back.
But with that, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, we'll stick with our second segment. So stay tuned.